you ever discovered a detail at a theme park and thought, there's gotta be a story behind that? Well, you've come to the right place. We're Amanda, Kevin, and Kim, the team behind Where in the Park, and we've spent years exploring theme parks and creating seek and find games that uncover the details that most people miss. And now we're diving into the history, stories, and secrets behind those magical details. So grab your curiosity, and maybe even a churro, and let's explore the parks together, one detail at a time. Hello and welcome to the Where in the Park podcast. For any first-time listeners, this podcast is all about theme parks and the stories and histories behind what you'll find there. We cover all theme parks, from Disney to Six Flags to Universal Studios and beyond. And this episode is about Grinchmas celebrations at Universal Studios theme parks around the world. Before we get started, I do want to remind everyone that our podcast is brought to you by whereinthepark.com. The next time you are planning a trip to your favorite theme parks, including the Universal parks here in the US, pick up some seek and find games to take with you to the parks. It's way more fun than standing in lines all day, and you'll appreciate the parks more than you ever realized you could. Use promo code podcast10 to save 10% on your first order at whereinthepark.com. I would also like to take a moment to share a written review from Rachel and Michael, who gave us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcast and said, "Incredible. We've talked to this crew several times over a handful of years at MouseCon, and it's so cool to hear them talk about the parks and all the facts that make up their card games. We, a father and daughter, love listening to the podcast together. We're excited to see what comes next." Thank you so much, Rachel and Michael. You guys have been supporting us since the very beginning at our very first MouseCon in 2021, and we look forward to seeing you every year. So thank you so much for your wonderful review, and we love that you're enjoying the show. To see where we will be at next, be sure to check out our website, whereinthepark.com/events. And if you want to be like Rachel and Michael and leave us a review, then scroll down to your podcast player and hit that 5-star button, or leave a written review sharing what you've learned or how you've noticed more about the parks or whatever you'd like to share. Thank you so much for your support. Now, on with the show. Okay, so in recent years during the holiday season, Dr. Seuss's grumpy green character, the Grinch, takes over Universal parks around the globe during an event called Grinchmas. And in writing this episode, I had assumed that the Grinch character is famous enough in pop culture that he doesn't really need an introduction, but then we found some interesting details in its history that you might find interesting too. And also, it sets us up for what we're going to talk about at Universal, so let's do a quick overview. First off, children's book author Theodore Seuss Geisel, we all know him as Dr. Seuss, had been writing successful children's books since And to Think I Saw It on Mulberry Street, which was published in 1937. In 1953, he first used the word Grinch for a character, the beagle-beaked, ball-headed Grinch, which was a bird that appeared in the book Scrambled Eggs Super. A couple of years later, a yellow con artist character named Grinch tries to trick another character into buying a piece of string in The Hubbub and the Grinch, which was published as a 32-line poem in Red Book magazine in 1955. Neither of these are related to the book that we're talking about today, though. Sometime after March of 1957, soon after Geisel released the incredibly successful book The Cat in the Hat earlier that year, he decided to write a Christmas story to be published later that same year. There was an interview published in Red Book magazine in 1957 where he explained that the idea began while looking in the mirror brushing his teeth the day after Christmas the previous year, and he felt that his face looked rather Grinchish. This Christmas season was particularly difficult for Theodore and his wife Helen, who was experiencing some serious health issues. He also started to realize that he wasn't a fan of how commercialized Christmas had become. And at that moment, looking in the mirror in 1956, he would later explain, quote, "Something had gone wrong with Christmas, I realized, or more likely, with me." He explained that the majority of the story only took a few weeks for him to complete, but it took him a few months to figure out the ending. He would later admit that the Grinch was, quote, a nasty anti-Christmas character that was really myself. In fact, the Grinch says, "For 53 years I've put up with it now," referring to the number of Christmas celebrations he's overheard from Whoville. Dr. Seuss was 53 years old when he wrote the book. That being said, he wanted to avoid making the story seem overly religious, embracing more of a secular Christmas. Geisel was a non-practicing Lutheran, and he wanted the story to be more about love and togetherness overtaking materialism, based on human experience, not about a requirement to join a specific religion. And I've read that there are other books released around the same time as The Grinch that included at least a tinge of anti-Semitism, which he was trying to avoid. So the story was released on October 12, 1957, which was the December issue of Red Book magazine. The first edition of the book would come out November 24th. While the story is pretty well known, I again will give a quick recap as it will set us up for what is to come later in this episode. So feel free to say some of these lines with me in your best Grinchy voice. Okay, so the story of how the Grinch stole Christmas starts with the lines, "Every Who down in Whoville liked Christmas a lot, but the Grinch, who lived just north of Whoville, did not." This line also appears in every official adaptation of the story that has been created to date. The book continues to explain that the Grinch hated Christmas, and no one knows why, but the most likely reason is his heart was 2 sizes too small. He is shown living in a cave at the top of a hill above Whoville, where he looks down on them, hating their noise, their feastings, and their singing. Then, while wondering how to stop Christmas from coming, he gets a wonderful, awful idea to impersonate Santa Claus and, spoiler alert, steals all of the Christmas decorations, presents, and food from the residents of Whoville. In the book, the first house he visits is where he comes across Cindy Lou Who was not more than 2. When she asks why he's taking their tree, he lies to her, saying, quote, "There's a light on this tree that won't light on one side, so I'm taking it home to my workshop, my dear. I'll fix it up there, then I'll bring it back here." Without any other comment, she seems completely fine with this and goes back to bed, and the Grinch goes on to rob all the other houses of Whoville. Now, he takes a sled, right, full of the Christmas stuff to the top of Mount Crumpet, where he plans to dump it over the edge. Just before pushing it over the edge of the mountain, he realizes that the Whos should be waking up soon, and he takes joy in the idea of hearing them cry about losing all of their stuff, and decides to stop and listen for the sounds of sorrow coming from the town. Instead, though, he hears them singing and realizes that he hadn't stopped Christmas from coming. He stood in the snow and puzzled 3 hours before coming to the realization that maybe Christmas doesn't come from a store. Maybe Christmas, perhaps, means a little bit more. At this moment, his heart grows 3 sizes and he brings back all of the stolen Christmas items. In the end, he is shown carving roast beast, seated between 2 Whos. Now, when I said all of that, what color did you picture the Grinch? Well, if you're reading the book version in 1957, he is not green. All of the artwork in the book was in black and white, with red thrown in here and there. The Red Book magazine's version had different colors used on different pages, but the majority of the artwork from the book was not included in the magazine. The first appearance of the Grinch actually had him in a shade of green, but more of a teal green looking color, depending on the photo or scan of the image that you found. But on other pages, he appears as blue, then red, and also white with black outlined fur like in the book. Also in the book, his eyes were always pinkish red, but in the magazine, his eyes changed between white, yellow, red, and teal. The last piece of artwork, both in the book and the magazine, depicted that scene of the Grinch carving roast beast. In the magazine, the art is very colorful with red, yellow, and blue colors used, but the Grinch character appears the same as he does in the book, in black and white, looking similar to the Cat in the Hat, while the other Whos on either side of him are yellow. We will include photos of these different colors in the blog that accompanies this episode over whereinthepark.com/podcast. So, when did the Grinch officially become green? Well, it wasn't until 9 years later when Dr. Seuss partnered with an old army friend he met during World War II, world-famous animator Chuck Jones. Together, they created the animated version of How the Grinch Stole Christmas that appeared on December 18th, 1966. According to interviews with Chuck Jones, he decided the Grinch should be the same ugly shade of green as the rental cars he kept receiving when he would visit Theodore Geisel in La Jolla, California to work on the project. And Theodore agreed. The 26-minute-long TV special was produced by MGM Animation and Visual Arts and was directed by Chuck Jones. It would stay pretty true to the book, with a few scenes added to stretch the roughly 15-minute read of the book. One of those scenes included the roughly 3-minute-long song, "You're a Mean One, Mr. Grinch." Geisel actually wrote the lyrics to the song, working with Albert Hague, a composer who had won 2 Tony Awards in 1959 for Best Composer and Best Musical for a show called Redhead. Though the rest of the show was narrated by Boris Karloff, famous for playing Frankenstein's monster in the 1931 Universal Pictures film, the song was sung by Thurl Ravenscroft, most commonly known for being the voice of Tony the Tiger for Frosted Flakes, but known by theme park fans as the ghost host from Disney's Haunted Mansion. Other sections added to the TV special were more scenes with Max, the Grinch's dog. He appears very little in the book, in just one paragraph during the scene in which the Grinch ties an antler to Max's head. The animated special would feature Max in several new scenes, including struggling to run up Mount Crumpet with a sled full of stolen items, and when Max joined the Who's in their celebratory dinner at the end of the story. Now, that animated special originally aired on ABC, but was owned by MGM Animation and Visual Arts, which was a studio founded and led by Chuck Jones that was owned by Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer. In 1985, Ted Turner, the guy who essentially created basic cable when he launched TBS, or Turner Broadcasting System, he would go on to create CNN, TNT, the Cartoon Network, and more. But yeah, he briefly bought MGM before selling the company back to its previous owners, but he kept the rights to all film and TV that had been created by the company before May of 1986, which obviously included this 1966 Grinch special. In October of 1996, Time Warner acquired Turner Broadcasting System for roughly $7.5 billion. Today, the rights to the TV special are owned by Warner Brothers Discovery. And if you haven't been following the news, or if you're listening to this at a time far off in the future, at this moment in time, December 2025, there has been a lot of drama going on with the Warner Brothers film and TV library, with Netflix, Paramount, and Comcast trying to get a piece of the company. Just within the past week, news alerts went out saying that Netflix had won the bidding war, but then the next day, headlines about Paramount making a hostile takeover bid rippled through the news feed. So what's going to happen to the 1966 Grinch rights? As of right now, while we're recording this, nobody knows. Okay, so before I continue, I just want to point out that the Grinch as a character, as well as the other Dr. Seuss intellectual property, is owned by Dr. Seuss Enterprises LP, a company that was created after Theodore Geisel's death in September of 1991. Okay, so let's get back to figuring out how Grinchmas got to the parks. Now, if you've been listening to Where in the Park podcast for a while, then hopefully you've already heard some of our episodes about Universal Studios Florida, as well as our episode about Jay Stein that aired last month. The original Florida park by Universal opened June 7th, 1990, and a year later, Jay Stein held a meeting about Project X, an idea that would evolve into the concept for a second theme park at Orlando Resort named Cartoon World. An early plan for what they were hoping to be at that park's primary kid-focused land was an area based on the characters by Dr. Seuss. By the time they were ready to move forward with trying to get the rights to the stories and characters, Geisel had already passed away, so they had to convince his second wife and now widow, Audrey Geisel, that they had a good idea. There's an article by Alicia Stella at OrlandoParkStop.com from 2020 about Universal's Cartoon World concept, where in the section about Dr. Seuss as Fantasyland, she explains that Audrey was protective of Theodore's works, and they had made backup plans to create a land based on the Hanna-Barbera or Tiny Toon Adventures if they weren't able to make a deal. Steven Spielberg, the award-winning director, was a creative partner in the Universal Parks back then, as he is today, and when he tried to reach out to Audrey, even he was ignored. Someone at Universal was eventually able to get her literary agent to visit them in Orlando to see what they had been designing, and when he liked what he saw, he called her to also look at the plans. She did, and apparently she also liked what she saw. Over on the Security and Exchange Commission's website, you can find the original 1994 formal agreement contract between Dr. Seuss Enterprises and MCA Inc., the parent company of Universal Studios at the time. There is a line in the contract that states, quote, Dr. Seuss Enterprises grants to MCA the worldwide exclusive license to use Dr. Seuss elements and attractions at theme parks. Over on the blog for this episode at whereinthepark.com/podcast, we've included our full list of resources and links to everything. So be sure to check that out if you want a deeper dive. It is pretty interesting. Okay, so with that, Universal and only Universal could now bring Dr. Seuss elements with approval of Dr. Seuss Enterprises to any of their theme parks in the world, which at that moment only included Hollywood and Florida. There was an amendment in 2009, which appears to narrow down the countries where they would have theme park exclusivity to the United States, Canada, United Kingdom, United Arab Emirates, South Korea, and the People's Republic of China. Now, with all of that laid out, the only Universal parks with Grinchmas this year are in the United States. Universal Studios Japan, Singapore, and Beijing all have Christmas celebrations being advertised on their websites, but none of them include the Grinch, and none of them currently include any elements from Dr. Seuss in their theme parks at all. Okay, so Universal has the theme park rights to Dr. Seuss as of 1994, and Seuss Landing opens with Islands of Adventure on May 28, 1999. A year and a half later, both Universal Studios and Universal's Islands of Adventure would debut Grinchmas as their, quote, Hula Day celebrations. In Hollywood, this included a Whovian procession parading through the park several times a day. There was acrobatic Seussian street performers, singing Who's, real snow to play in, and close-up encounters with the Grinch and his dog, Max. The event also included a 41-foot-tall Mount Crumpet snow plummet sledding hill, the Grinch's cave maze, and original props from the movie. Meanwhile, in Orlando, the entire Seuss Landing area was decorated for Grinchmas. They had a meet and greet with the Grinch in his lair, which was located where the queue for the high-in-the-sky Seuss trolley is today, and they had a street show reenacting the story from the book in 3 parts, concluding the event with a daily lighting of the Whoville tree. If you're wondering why that sounds a lot more than what we have these days, especially for the Hollywood park, it's because these events were likely paid for by the marketing budget for the live-action movie. That movie, also named How the Grinch Stole Christmas, was produced by Brian Grazer and Ron Howard's Imagine Entertainment, directed by Ron Howard and starred Jim Carrey as the Grinch, distributed by Universal Pictures. It might seem like a no-brainer, but Universal went through all of this trouble to get the theme park rights to Dr. Seuss, so of course they would also have the film rights, right? Well, it wasn't exactly that simple. In the book, How the Grinch Stole Hollywood, an official Universal publishing book by Andy Lipschultz, there's a foreword by Ron Howard. In that foreword, he tells a story about how Brian Grazer told him he was pursuing the screen rights for a live-action adaptation for their company. Again, that's Imagine Entertainment to produce. The company, which had been founded in 1985, after they had worked together on the film Splash for Disney in '84, had worked with many different film studios to distribute their movies. Later in the book, the author explains how Theodore Geisel had a bad experience turning his ideas into live-action movies, with the flop of the 1953 film The 5,000 Fingers of Dr. T, which he wrote. Also, he was happy with the way the animated special had come out in '66, so he wasn't interested in redoing it. Audrey, again, she is Theodore's widow, is on record referring to the technological advances in filmmaking that occurred between 91 and 98 were what made her feel like the time was right to bring The Grinch to live action. So, in 1998, she put the movie rights up for auction. On September 16, 1998, multiple news outlets reported the big news that Universal and Imagine Entertainment had won the bidding war for Seuss. There's an article from Variety from that date which shares that the runner-ups in the auction were Fox and Warner Brothers. Reporters from the time, they were aware of the upcoming Islands of Adventure Seuss Land, so they mentioned that a reason why Universal would likely be willing to outspend Fox and Warner Brothers on film rights was because of their theme park and the synergy that this would enable. That price? Articles referred to sources saying Universal paid $5 million for the Grinch rights and possibly another $4 million for the rights of Oh, the Places You'll Go. But that wasn't all. They also had to pay 4% of the box office gross and 50% of money earned from merchandise sales. Back in the 1990s, this was huge. To put it in perspective, 5 years earlier in '93, after the success of Jurassic Park, author Michael Crichton received a record-tying $2.5 million for the film rights to his next book. The $5 million price tag for Seuss made huge news in the industry. The Variety article also mentioned that Grinch would be placed on a fast track, hoping for a Christmas 1999 release. While the LA Times article from that same day reported that Universal Pictures chairman Casey Silver had said he'd hoped to have the film in theaters either Christmas 2000 or the following year's holiday season. Well, the movie would release, as I said earlier, on November 17th, 2000, which was the same day that Grinchmas premiered on both coasts. I'm not exactly sure who decided on the word Grinchmas at either Universal or Dr. Seuss Enterprises. It doesn't appear in the books nor in the follow-up books, but I did find an article that was posted in the LA Times in December of 1995 about Jeffrey and Carol Landon, who would run a special tour of Newport Bay on Kids Night at the Newport Harbor Christmas Boat Parade. They would take children, including terminally ill, homeless, or survivors of life-threatening diseases, on a free tour of the harbor's Christmas lights. Jeffrey was known in the boating community as Mr. Grinch and had t-shirts made for the children that said Merry Grinchmas. According to the article, he had been using the book as their decorating theme since 1986 and had been taking kids on tours on their 50-foot boat since 1989. Also, in 1998, there's an article about a live production of How the Grinch Stole Christmas at the Old Globe Theater in San Diego, California, which ends with a quote from Audrey Geisel where she says, "Merry Grinchmas and Happy Who Year." It's always possible that the Geisels had used the term Grinchmas for years. Theodore Geisel used to drive around in a Cadillac with a California vanity plate with the word Grinch on it. The car is currently on display at the Lyman and Marie Wood Museum of Springfield History, located in Springfield, Massachusetts, which is the city where Geisel was born and raised. Interestingly, the Museum of Springfield also holds their own annual Grinchmas festivities every year, but it seems likely that they were borrowing the term from Universal. Okay, so where were we? There was the hit movie with a popular theme park event tied to it. And so the next year, in 2001, Grinchmas returned to Orlando. But over in Hollywood, guests would see some of the buildings that were used in the film during the studio tour. But that's about it. They would eventually add a scene to the section of the tour with residents of Whoville and the Grinch dancing and singing. The event would return annually in Florida through 2005, but they decided not to run Grinchmas in 2006. In 2007, though, they would bring it back to Florida, this time with a stage show that included music from Mannheim Steamroller. The next year, Hollywood brought back Grinchmas as well, with a real snow playground and Whoville activities set up in the Adventures of Curious George water play area, while it was turned off for the winter, of course. Today, most of that area was replaced with the Wizarding World of Harry Potter. In 2009, the Grinchmas area was moved to the Wild Wild West arena, and from there, the events have been kind of on autopilot. There have been a few changes here and there with celebrities reading the book, for example. There was a change in 2013 when the Hollywood Wild Wild West Arena was removed and the Universal Plaza was installed in its place, but Grinchmas kept being added to that section of the park, including a 60 to 65-foot tree. In 2017, the Whoville sets were removed from the backlot. Oh yeah, I do want to point out that usually a few times per visit during the season, you'll hear the song, "Where Are You Christmas?" If you've never seen the film from 2000, you might not realize that that song was actually created for the movie. It was written by composer James Horner and Will Jennings, and in the movie, it was named Christmas, Why Can't I Find You? Apparently, they co-wrote a longer version with Mariah Carey, but they weren't able to release the track because of a pending legal case with her ex-husband. So they brought in country music star Faith Hill to record the song, and that's likely the one you've heard outside of Grinchmas. Within the past decade, it has also been covered by many others, including Pentatonix and JoJo Siwa. And, well, that takes us to today, where Grinchmas events are just as popular as ever. And despite a 2018 animated film by Illuminations based on The Grinch, the events in the park still revolve around the designs from the 2000 live-action film. Universal Studios Japan did have a Grinchmas-style celebration in 2018 for that film, but it looks like they just ended up being a one-time thing. So there you are. That's the story behind Grinchmas at the parks. If we left anything out, or if you have more information about anything we covered, or even photos of Grinchmas over the years, please leave us a comment over on our YouTube post of this episode and let us know in our free-to-join Facebook group, Where in the Park Explorers. If you've enjoyed this episode and maybe even learned something new, please leave us a review on Apple Podcast or Spotify to let others know that they're missing out on so much over here. Be sure to like and subscribe over on our YouTube as well. And if you haven't done so already, follow us on your favorite social media platform at Where in the Park. And well, this is Amanda signing off from the Where in the Park podcast. And until next time, we'll see you somewhere in the park. Bye for now. Thanks for exploring with us today. If you're ready to take your park experience to the next level, check out Where in the Park Games. They're self-paced, seek-and-find adventures designed for you to experience the park in a whole new way. Whether you're visiting for a birthday, a family gathering, date night, or even a solo trip, you'll be searching up high and down low for the details found in the park's theming. Get ready to discover a deeper appreciation for your favorite theme park with a Where in the Park game and take 10% off your next adventure by using code PODCAST10. Which park will you explore next? Until then, we'll see you somewhere in the park.